Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, we begin in Washington, where the White House is preparing for the return of Donald Trump. Vice President Kamala Harris called the former president yesterday to concede her loss on Election Day. Now she is urging her supporters to embrace a peaceful transfer of power.
Now I know folks are feeling and experiencing a range of emotions right now. I get it. But we must accept the results of this election.
But Vice President Harris says accepting the results does not mean conceding the fight that fueled her campaign.
I will never give up the fight for a future where Americans can pursue their dreams, ambitions, and aspirations, where the women of America have the freedom to make decisions about their own body and not have their government telling them what to do.
Kamala Harris says accepting an election result is a fundamental principle of a democracy, even in a loss. President Biden also spoke with President-elect Trump yesterday and invited him to the White House. The president will address the nation about the election outcome this morning at 11 a.m. Wall Street time, and we will bring you those comments live on Bloomberg Radio and television.
Well, Nathan, Chinese President Xi Jinping congratulated Trump on his victory. He also called for stable ties between the world's two largest economies. The early, fairly warm comments from Beijing contrast with the testy relationship Trump had with China during his first term. A trade war erupted in 2018, and Trump has threatened to hit Chinese shipments with 60% levies.
Well, Karen, now Democrats are pinning their hopes on the House to avoid a full Republican sweep. GOP control of the Senate is assured. Republicans have a 52-seat majority so far. Races are still left to be called in Arizona, Maine, Pennsylvania, and Nevada. In the House, Republicans currently hold a 206 to 191 seat edge. 38 congressional races are still being counted.
Well, among the key races that were called yesterday, Nathan, Democrats Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin and Michigan's Alyssa Slotkin both won re-election. 5 Democrats and 1 Republican won races for House seats in California. In Virginia, Democrat Eugene Vindman won the race for the House seat left open by fellow Democrat Abigail Spanberger, who's running for governor. It could take several more days to learn the complete balance of power in the House. California alone still has 6 races to decide, and absentee ballot rules make that state notoriously slow in counting its ballots.
And as Democrats did suffer big election losses, Karen, strategists say the party will have to immediately analyze what went wrong. We get more from Bloomberg News senior editor Bill Ferries.
Kamala Harris lost basically across the board. In terms of how President Biden performed 4 years ago, she lost even where she won. I mean, even in key demographics, she saw her support fall. In a state like Florida that Joe Biden lost by 3 percentage points in 2020, Kamala Harris is losing by 13 percentage points. So there's got to be a big assessment of what went wrong, what message voters, were really looking for. And I think in the end, when you looked at exit polls of people saying the economy was a problem, immigration was a problem, and broadly, they didn't think the country was on the right track. As an incumbent vice president, that was going to be a very difficult race to run successfully in.
Bloomberg's Bill Ferries adds that Kamala Harris even underperformed in traditionally blue states like New York, where Trump secured the highest percentage of voters of any Republican presidential candidate since at least 1996.
Well, Nathan, one more election we're keeping tabs on, the race for mayor of San Francisco. The city is still tabulating results from Tuesday's election, but so far political newcomer Daniel Lurie is holding his lead over current mayor London Breed. After 14 rounds of counting, philanthropist and Levi's heir Lurie has more than 56% of the ranked choice votes, with Breed at 43.
Turning to markets now, Karen, futures are higher, adding to yesterday's historic rally. The S&P 500 registered its best post-election day ever, surging 2.5%. The Dow rallied more than 1,500 points, or 3.6%, and the Russell 2000 index of small-cap stocks gained almost 6%. Anastasia Amoroso is chief investment strategist at iCapital.
The reason why small caps in particular are rallying so much is because they are typically more sensitive to, Republican majority. And so that's helping sentiment. They're also more sensitive to the domestic orientation and potential for lower taxes. And of course, they're sensitive to rate relief. And so you kind of have this perfect combination of factors.
And iCapital's Anastasia Amoroso says Treasury yields climbed across the curve as well. U.S. 10-year yields advanced 17 basis points to 4.44%. Right now, the 10-year is giving some of that back. It's at 4.42. Bitcoin, which rallied nearly 10% yesterday, is down 1.5%.
Well, Nathan, the rich got richer after Donald Trump's election victory and possible red sweep. We get that story from Bloomberg's John Tucker. John, good morning.
And we're talking about a lot of money here, Karen. Good morning. The fortunes of the 10 richest people in the world surged by a daily record after Election Day. According to the Bloomberg Billionaires Index, the net worth of billionaires surged by $63.5 billion. The biggest gain was for the world's richest person. Elon Musk alone added $26.5 billion to his pot. Amazon's Jeff Bezos and Oracle's Larry Ellison were also among the top gainers. It's the biggest daily increase since Bloomberg's Wealth Index began back in 2012. Much of the gains for the ultra-rich came down to a surge in stocks. Musk, who campaigned alongside with the president-elect, is poised to influence policy since Trump has vowed to give him an official role. Tesla shares in New York surged 15% on Wednesday. In New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
Okay, John, thank you. Now the investors turn their attention to Washington and this afternoon's Fed decision. We get a preview from Bloomberg's Michael McKee.
The election results leave the Fed little room for maneuver. Policymakers should go ahead with another quarter-point reduction in the benchmark U.S. lending rate, but the policy path they laid out at their September meeting is now off the table. With interest rates rising on Trump policy inflation concerns, they will likely signal a pause in the rate-cutting cycle until they have a better idea of how the current economy is performing and how far Trump will go with his tariff, tax, and deportation proposals. There are no new economic forecasts coming out of this meeting. We'll get a statement on the policy rate and most likely a lot of Chair Jay Powell saying, "We don't know what happens next." Michael McKee, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Mike, thanks. For full Fed coverage, stick with us for a special edition of Bloomberg Surveillance, The Fed Decides, with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz. It's coming up at 1:30 Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and on the Bloomberg Podcasts YouTube page.
Well, Nathan, we also have a policy decision overseas. The Bank of England is expected to lower interest rates for the second time this year due to an unexpectedly fast slowdown in inflation.
In Asia, Nissan has cut its annual profit outlook and announced plans to eliminate thousands of jobs globally as the car maker looks to counteract deteriorating sales in major markets. Nissan says some 9,000 positions will be slashed globally.
Back here in the U.S., Nathan, shares of Qualcomm. They are up almost 8% this morning. The world's biggest seller of smartphone processors gave a bullish sales forecast for the current period, pointing to bright spots in the mobile device industry.
And Karen, Lyft shares are lifting higher by the tune of 23% this morning. The ride-hailing company issued strong earnings guidance for both this quarter and the full year. Lyft also introduced a new $3 a month plan that allows commuters to avoid surging prices during peak hours.
And it's time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz called for a snap election after divisions over how to revive the lackluster economy triggered the breakup of his three-party ruling coalition. The crisis came to a head with Scholz's shock dismissal of Finance Minister Christian Lindner late last night, saying that the chairman of the pro-business FDP party had refused a proposal to suspend rules limiting new government borrowing. Scholz called for a confidence vote in January with the goal of pulling forward next year's federal election to March from September. California fire officials are working to battle the growing mountain fire. It has already burned more than 14,000 acres, and evacuations have been ordered for several areas, including the city of Camarillo. Ventura County Fire Chief Dustin Gardner.
Every firefighter in the region, every law enforcement agency available, every helicopter, every fixed-wing aircraft, everything we've been able to get a hold of is here fighting this fire.
The fire is fueled by dry conditions and Santa Ana winds gusting up to 80 miles per hour. Cuba is reeling after a powerful Category 3 hurricane ripped across the island and fierce winds knocked out the country's power grid. Forecasters had warned that Hurricane Rafael could bring life-threatening storm surges, winds, and flash floods to Cuba after ravaging parts of the Cayman Islands and Jamaica. UNICEF is asking for help to provide relief to a large group of children affected by a historic drought along the Amazon River. Antonio Mero is an emergency manager with the organization.
This is basically the strongest drought in history in the last century, and unfortunately there are no improvement expected in the coming weeks and months. Several tributaries of the Amazon River are literally drying up.
UNICEF's Antonio Maro says they estimate more than 420,000 children are currently affected by this. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update, brought to you by Tri-State Audi. We bring in John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. The end of a 4-game road trip for the Knicks. They won the first 2, but lost the last 2. Trip ended in Atlanta. The Knicks had a 5-point lead and possession with 3 minutes left. The Hawks went on a 13-1 run. Atlanta won 121-116. Impressive game for Hawks rookie Zachary Rissache. First pick of the draft, the Frenchman scored 33 points. Karl Anthony Towns led the Knicks with 34. Warriors won in Boston 118-112. Jason Tatum 32 points in the loss. He was facing Steve Kerr, his Olympics coach, who benched Tatum a couple of times last summer in Paris. Cleveland off to its best start ever, now 9-0 with a win at New Orleans. Hockey, the Capitals on Alex Ovechkin third period goal beat Nashville 3-2, and for Ovechkin, career goal number 861 needs 34 more to break Wayne Gretzky's all-time record. College hoops, Columbia upset Villanova 90-80. High hopes this season for Rutgers. A couple of big-time freshmen. The Scarlet Knights opened up 75-52 over Wagner. Baseball general manager meetings going on in San Antonio, and in town, the Uber agent Scott Boras, his biggest client, free agent Juan Soto.
Getting an opportunity to acquire a player at this age with this skill, with this character, with this experience, with so much performance gradient established that they understand the surplus value of it.
Many expect Soto's decision to come down to staying with the Yankees or joining the Mets. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Karen Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. Washington and the world are preparing for the return of Donald Trump to the world's most powerful office. Vice President Kamala Harris says she is committed to a peaceful transition.
While I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign.
Vice President Harris says accepting an election result is a fundamental principle of democracy, even in a loss. For more, we are joined by Lindsay Newman, geopolitical risk expert and columnist at G0 Media. Lindsay, welcome back. Did we hear from Vice President Harris an implicit rebuke of former President, now President-elect Trump, who still has yet to concede his loss 4 years ago? Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, we certainly heard what she was saying about, the fight. She carries the fight forward. I think the big question, Ethan, is what is the fight that the Democratic Party is carrying forward in the sort of postmortem that we're all doing this morning and yesterday? The question is, did the Democratic Party and did Kamala Harris' campaign, was the strategy a flawed strategy, particularly focusing in on these points around freedoms and democracy and turning the page, when it seems very clearly that the question that voters really had in their minds was the one Trump was asking, which was, are you better today than you were 4 years ago?
So how does the strategy change as Democrats reassess what they did wrong this time around?
Well, if you're in the Democratic leadership, you definitely have to be doing some soul searching and asking yourself, what do we need to do differently? This is not just we can roll into 2026 and do more of the same. There are some there's some deep divisions within the party, intra-party divisions around the future of the policy, the message of the policy. There's a progressive wing, there's centrists. This is not a united party, and that really hurt them yesterday on Tuesday, and really helped the Republicans. You see the map turn red across the board. And it's because this is a mandate for Donald Trump. He did not just win, he won convincingly. He beat expectations, polling, and betting markets. He's now, for the first time, not only won the Electoral College, but he won the popular vote. So this is not a small loss for the Democrats. This is a time for them to really look at what they're going to do differently.
By contrast, are you saying that the Republican Party is more unified than the Democrats? And what could that mean for policymaking under a Trump 2.0?
Republicans are clearly more united than Democrats are. And as we've seen in the demographic analysis, they are picking up, they're widening the umbrella. They are reaching wider swaths of the American population than they had in 2020 and in midterm elections. Going into January 20th, 2025, Trump and his key allies around him, his advisors around him, are clear. Had 4 years to prepare for this moment. This is not a 2016 redo. They are clear that whether it's Project 2025, what their policy agenda is, believe what he's been saying on the campaign trail around tariffs, around trade policy, around corporate tax reductions, around potentially sealing the border. Bigger question marks around these promises to end the war in Ukraine immediately, even before stepping into office. There's a lot of combing through what that could actually involve since his victory on Tuesday. But absolutely, Donald Trump and his advisors are ready and prepared and know what their intentions are.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak, your morning podcast on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 92.9 in Boston, and nationwide on Sirius XM Channel 121.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, now with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto interfaces.
And don't forget to subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. It's the latest news whenever you want it, in 5 minutes or less. Search Bloomberg News Now on your favorite podcast platform to stay informed all day long. I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.